The Kukamush packed up all their belongings and drove 8 hours to a farming community in Brits in the northwest. They also found accommodation on a farm there. The community of Brits would never get the chance to get to know the Kukamush before the worst thing imaginable would happen. On the 25th of October in 2016, Quibus drove his bucky to the Brits Provincial Hospital, where it came to a screeching halt. A paramedic outside noticed that Quibus was running towards him while carrying the limp body of Poppie van Merwe. Quibus was screaming for help while he ran towards him, with Louisa and their young son in tow. He noticed that Poppie was already blue around her mouth, which meant that she hasn't been breathing for some time. The paramedic rushed Poppie to the ER and laid her on the bed, where he would start CPR. However, when he opened her mouth, he realized that rigor mortis had already set in. He knew she was far beyond saving. As he looked at her, he saw her whole body was covered in bruises. Quibus Kukamud would explain the bruises by saying Poppie fell around in the bucky while on the way to the hospital. Dr. Richard Gumba arrived, and together with the paramedic, they attempted to ask Poppie's brother what happened. He was scared and didn't want to make eye contact. All he said was that Poppie didn't want to eat her food. Dr. Gumba noticed a large bruise and swelling on Poppie's forehead, which indicated a head injury. She was only wearing underwear when she was brought in, and the doctor would later say that there was no part of her body that wasn't bruised and blue. Dr. Gumba took the family to his office and told them that he was phoning the police. Poppie's broken body was being photographed when Sergeant Gift Mathone arrived at the hospital. He was taken aside by the doctor and shown the photographs, and the seasoned policeman could not control the tears flowing down his face. He had never seen a 3-year-old girl so utterly broken. Quibus and Louisa were interviewed separately. They both told the same story. They were eating in front of the TV when Poppie suddenly collapsed. However, when pressed about the huge bump on Poppie's forehead, Louisa admitted that Quibus hit her head into the cupboard the day before. Quibus Kukamud was arrested at the hospital. Louisa was allowed home with her young son. When the news broke of the beautiful little blonde girl who was brutally murdered by her stepfather, South Africa got angry. Very angry indeed. Quibus started getting death threats soon after his arrest. As soon as South Africa realized that Louisa was aware of what had happened to her daughter during the months of the abuse, she too felt the wrath of the public. In November of 2016, Quibus Kukamud was denied bail. During his hearing, several members of the public had to be removed as they threatened the accused. Poppie was laid to rest on the 4th of November in 2016. Her mother appeared at the funeral, all battered and blue. It would later be known that a woman posing as a police officer paid Louisa a visit at her home. Louisa said that she was taken to an isolated piece of land and beaten up. Shortly after Poppie's funeral, her brother was placed in the care of social services. He couldn't be placed with his biological father because of the protection order that Louisa had in place, but he was placed with an unknown member of the family. In December 2016, Poppie's autopsy results came in. The autopsy report stated that Poppie died from one or more blows to the head. He couldn't discount that she had been kicked or that her head was smashed into a solid surface. Dr. Simon stated that Poppie had been the victim of sustained and deliberate physical abuse over a long period of time. On the 16th of December in 2016, Sergeant Mathone went to see Louisa Kukamud. He told her that her version of events didn't match the evidence presented in the autopsy report. She then told Mathone that they were watching TV, but she went outside, and when she came back she found Poppie blue and unconscious in the bathroom. She didn't know whether or not Quibus did anything to her, but the night before, he did hit her head into the cupboard. Sergeant Mathone arrested Louisa and charged her with murder and child abuse. Louisa Kukamud was denied bail. Quibus Kukamud struggled to find an attorney to represent him, and this along with other issues delayed the case for almost a year. In May of 2017, Kukamud's legal team moved to strike the case from the roll, as their client experienced undue hardships while awaiting trial in prison. Both Quibus and Louisa faced 4 charges each, 1 for the murder of Poppie, 1 for the abuse of Poppie, and 2 for the abuse of Poppie's brother and half-sister Marlies, who admitted to being beaten by Quibus while her mother watched. Quibus and Louisa pleaded not guilty in the High Court of Johannesburg in October of 2017. Quibus blamed Louisa for the abuse, stating that he only ever hit the children on their hands and bottoms. He said that the night before her death, Poppie had made a mess in her bed and Louisa threw her against the cupboard. He said that he was out grocery shopping and came back to find Poppie unconscious. He shook her and she came around. Later, after he came inside, he again found her unconscious, but he couldn't get her to wake up again. He threw water on her face, thumped on her back and tried mouth to mouth, but nothing worked. He then rushed her to the hospital. Louisa in turn blamed Quibus, saying he abused the children but she was too scared to do anything about it. She stated that she never asked or instructed him to abuse them, and she never took part in the abuse. Poppie's older brother testified via video conference. He stated that on the day of Poppie's death, Quibus struck her head into the toilet and flushed it. Poppie didn't wake up. He talked of several occasions where he and his sister were beaten, kicked, and thrown around. When asked what his mother did on the day that Poppie was lying on the floor dying, he said that she stood in the doorway and watched. The fact that Poppie's abuse was never reported in Orania was also brought up, and an application was made to the NPA to charge other with culpability in Poppie's murder, but the NPA would decline to prosecute. Judge Baum found Quibus and Louisa equally guilty and condemned those who aided in the continuing abuse of Poppie by not reporting the events to the police. In 2018, while awaiting sentencing, Quibus Kukamur tried on 2 occasions to end his life. In May of 2018, both Quibus and Louisa received life sentences for the murder of Poppie van der Merwe, as well as additional years for the abuse of their 2 other children. Later on, Louisa would reveal that Poppie wasn't well on the day of her death. When Quibus got home, she told him that Poppie is refusing to eat her food, and then he kicked her in the stomach. She can't remember if Poppie reacted, but she left the house to unload groceries from the car. Her 3-year-old daughter was kicked in the stomach and she went outside to get groceries. Poppie van der Merwe was 3 years old when she was brutally murdered by her mother and stepfather. She was only 3 years old, and she did not deserve this. Until next time.